Good morning, I'm Darren from Brew-Boss. I've had several people request videos of the Brew-Boss system, setup of the Brew-Boss, installation, and actual use of the Brew-Boss in a brewing session. So we're going to go through today and actually do a brew session and cover the various aspects of the process, from startup, the initial cleaning, initial assembly of the Brew-Boss system, and of the actual brew session and cleanup afterward. So let's get started. I'm going to go through the assembly of the Brew-Boss system prior to brewing. We're getting ready to brew here today. And I'm going to go through the assembly of the kettle itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is attach the valve to the front. This valve happens to have a sight gauge on it. You install the white gasket on the valve. Simply align it with the groove so that it's pinched between there. Select a clamp, center it, and tighten the clamp up. Okay, so next thing to do is to install the heating element. The heating element gets installed in this port. Very important to install the heater element with this face of the heater up. You want to be able to see down into this, get a little closer, into this area from the top. So this is the surface that should be facing up. It should not look like this when you're looking at it from the top. The heater is less efficient that way and can overheat. So you definitely want to make sure when you install it, you're looking at it from this surface up. So I'm going to install it into the kettle now, and that's a simple matter of installing the gasket. The gasket, you want to use the red gasket on the heater. Align it into the grooves so that it's centered on the tri-clamp tuning on the heater. Slide it into the kettle and carefully install and tighten up the clamp. Just hand tight. The next thing we're going to do is install the temperature probe. To do that, you slide it into the hole and tighten the nut. Once you feel resistance, just give it about 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn more, and then plug it into the controller. Next thing we're going to do is hook up the pump and the plumbing. Then hook up the feed hose, which is the short hose from the valve to the pump. Like I say, we supply 6 feet of hosing for your system. I find a 2-foot section here from the kettle to the pump in works well, and a 4-foot section out of the pump to the accessory port on the kettle. Now you notice that we have hose clamps on the fittings that are on the output of the pump. That's the only place you need the hose clamps in your plumbing, is that's the area where there's pressure in the tubing. Okay, we're going to add the water now. So fill it up to about the temperature probe, just so it's above the temperature probe, and make sure that you don't have any leaks before you continue. It's a lot easier to empty 3 or 4 gallons of water than it is to empty the entire kettle. So I'm going to start filling here. I've got real good pressure here. This won't take long. Okay, I'm just above the level of the temperature probe now, and I'm checking for water. I don't have any leaks anywhere. I think all my seals are good. I've got water in my sight gauge. It's currently at 4 gallons, which is exactly what you need to get just above the temperature probe. And the temperature probe itself, make sure that it's centered in the hole and that you don't have any tension on the cable pulling on it, because if the temperature probe touches metal inside the container, it's going to take the temperature of the kettle rather than the temperature of the liquid that's in it. And that can reduce your temperatures. It'll show you a lower temperature than you actually have. So it's very important that the temperature probe, you can feel, is centered in. You hear that clicking. You want to make sure it's centered in there and not touching any metal during the brew process, because the side of the kettle, even though the temperature of the water inside might be higher, the side of the kettle will be cooler because it's where the heat is exiting the system. So you want to make sure that's not touching any metal. So I'm going to continue filling this up to 8 gallons. So I've got my 8 gallons of water in the kettle, and the next step all is to do is put the cover on and basically start the brew process. We're going to go start the system up now. I've got the controller here. I'm going to press the start button.
Fill kettle with water. When finished, press the green start key.
Okay, now as we just mentioned, we've already done that. I validated there's no leaks. I don't have any drips anywhere on the system, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to hit the start button.
Place cover on kettle and then open the valve. When finished, press the green start key.
Okay, so now I'm going to place the cover on the kettle, and I'm going to do that because the actual system is going to recirculate the water during the heating to mash temperature. So there's actually going to be water coming out of the accessory port here. And so we want to make sure we do what it says. It says open the valve. I'm going to open the valve. Confirm that there's water flowing into the pump, and there is. Put the cover on the kettle, and then press the start button.
Heating water to strike temperature of 154 degrees.
Okay, now as you can see, my heater power is going up to 100% by the sliding bar. The heater's on, the pump is on, and my brew time has been started. I've got 1 minute into it already, and it's keeping track of my power use as well. So I'm just going to show you what's going on here in the kettle. All we've got is just a spray of water coming out of the pump, and the water's heating up, and this recirculation helps even the temperature out in the kettle while it's heating up to the brew, to the strike temperature. You can see the controller itself. We're at 60 degrees right now, 100% power, and 1 indicates that the pump is on. So if we watch this, we should have heat. What I like to do now is validate that the temperature actually starts to rise, indicating that the heater is actually plugged in, and as you can see it just went up to 61. That tells me that we definitely have power going to the heater. So I'll check back in when we get close to the strike temperature. But in the meantime, what we do is we grind our grains if you don't have that done for you already at the brew store or from your supplier. So I'm going to go do that, grind my grains, and we'll add them to the coffee filter in a minute. Okay, I've got my crushed grains and I'm ready for this recipe, and I want to add them to the coffee filter. So the first thing I do is screw the center infusion tube into the false bottom that goes inside the coffee filter. Lower the false bottom into the bottom of the coffee filter and install, this is very important, install the lift ring. Now you're not going to be using the lift ring right now, but what that does is it closes off the top of that lift ring, so when you're pouring your grains in, you don't accidentally get some inside that tube. If you do get grains inside this tube, it could plug the holes and end up in a stuck mash. So what we're going to do here is pour the grains for this recipe into the coffee filter. Coffee filter has been cleaned with PBW. I just soaked it for about 10 minutes in a PBW bath. Once the grains are in there, you can remove the top lift ring and install the cover. So simply put the cover over the top, align the tube with the hole, align the fittings for the clamps, and clamp the top on. Now, next thing I like to do so I'm ready to go when I'm brewing, is to add the quick fitting with the elbow barb to the filter, so it's ready when I lower it in to just simply hook up to the accessory port. So to install that, simply start the threads. Be very careful with this; they are copper threads, and kind of just walk it around. This is what I do with the hose until it gets a little bit tight. And again, just hand tighten that. You'll actually get to the point where you might start spinning the bottom. Then what I do is just tuck one of these fittings underneath the handle. So this will be ready to go when I want to lower this in to the kettle at the appropriate time. It's all ready to go, and the hose is already on. All I have to do is hook it up to the accessory port. Just wanted to check in. We started in about a minute, so we're 15 or 14 minutes into this brew session. And as you can see, we're at 120 degrees, and we started out at 60, so we've gone up 60 degrees in 14 minutes, which is a pretty good temperature rise. We're headed for the 154. You can see the target temp is automatically set at 154. And what I'm brewing today is my Miller Lite recipe that's on the website, and basically making a 5-gallon version of that for demonstration here. We've got the kettle and pump running, and water recirculating. As you can see, it's getting warm in there. You can see the steam coming out. And we're getting ready to add our grains once we reach our strike temperature, and I'll check back in then. Getting close to our set point of our 154 for our strike temperature, and I wanted to point some things out. You'll see that the power is automatically decreased, and that's based on your PWS and PWL settings. As we're getting close to our set point right now, we're at 149 and we're shooting for 154, now 150. When we get within a few degrees of the set point, the power is even going to decrease more. But this should all happen automatically so that our temperature rise curve ends up not overshooting the temperature we're shooting for. So I'll check back in as we get closer here to the 154. We're at 151. You can see the temperature's going up. And right there, actually, it's gone down to 45%. That's my PWL setting, which is our approaching set point. And you can see the graph is actually starting to level off right now because our power setting has gone down on the heating element. So a lot of people ask, how long does it take to get to strike temperature? We're almost there. I started with 60-degree water. Obviously, it depends on your ambient temperature and the temperature of the water you start with. But we're currently at 22 minutes. We started with 1 minute in before we actually started the heating process. So we've got about 22 minutes of heating time to get 8 gallons of water up to strike temperature, maybe 23 minutes by the time it actually hits it here.
Water at strike temperature. Please install the coffee filter with grains. When finished, press the green start key.
Okay, now as you can see, what it's done is it's automatically changed the target temperature for our next step, because that's what our step had, to 152, which is our actual mash temperature. So it's shut the heater off. We're in no hurry. Our temperature is currently 154. It hit it right on the head, and it's told us to install the coffee filter. So we'll do that now. Okay, the programmer controller has just told us to install the coffee filter. So one of the nice things I've got about my setup is I've got it on wheels. And it allows me to wheel the cart away from my range hood when I'm doing any operations with the coffee filter. So I'm literally going to wheel the entire brew system away from the hood, remove the cover, I'll let the spare water drain here, set that aside, and I'm going to set the coffee filter into the kettle. Now it's very important when dropping this in here to align these legs so that they're centered on the heating element. It's very, very critical. You don't want to drop it on top of the heating element. And also try to keep it away from the temperature probe as it's being entered in. And that's all there is to entering the coffee filter. So I'm going to lay the handle down. I'm going to attach it to the accessory port. Using the clamp. Then twist the L-barb inside the container until you get a nice bend in the hose so that there's no kinks in the hose. Place the cover back on the kettle. I'm going to push the whole apparatus back underneath my hood. And I'm going to hit the start key to say that I've added the grains.
Make certain the cover is placed on the kettle. When finished, press the green start key.
Okay, and I've made certain that the cover is on the kettle. And we will hit the green start key.
Heating to mash temperature of 152 degrees for first mash step. Maintaining mash temperature of 152 degrees for first mash step.
Okay, you'll see that it automatically set our timer for 1 hour. By adding the cold coffee filter and cold grains to our water, which was at 154, it dropped exactly 2 degrees. And that's where I've come up with my strike temperature of 154. Just through experience. By adding that filter and the grains, it drops about 2 degrees. So okay, checking back in, we've got 35 minutes left in our first mash step. As you can see, we're at 152, looking for 152. And you'll see the power level now is it's down to 9. It's automatically adjusted the PWRM, which is the maintain power level, down to 9. We started at 28 or 29, as I recall. So it's doing a really good job. As you can see from the temperature graph, we came up, didn't overshoot. You can see we're within a degree all the way down of our 152. And it's honed in on 9 for a power setting and seems to be holding that real well. So 30 cents of cost so far, which is pretty amazing. We'll keep a track on this, and I'll touch base when we're about ready to start the next mash step. Now, that'll happen automatically. We don't need to do anything for that, but I'll show you it happening anyway. Discuss the coffee filter a little bit during the mash. And it's important, very, very important, especially with smaller batches, meaning a 5-gallon batch in this 15-gallon kettle, with the coffee filter, to make sure the fluid level inside stays above the level of the temperature probe. So I'm going to take the cover off here. You see our mash is going on. I'm going to look down in here. I don't know if you can see it between here, and I want to make sure that the water level is above, I'm steaming up here a little bit, above the temperature probe, which it is, and you can hear the flow of water out of the filter. It's very important to match the flow of the pump out with the flow in, okay? So what I've done here is I've actually taken the valve and restricted the flow a little bit to maintain that level inside the kettle. If I open this valve all the way, the flow into the filter will not equal the flow out of the filter because it has to get through the grain, and I'll end up sucking the level down in the kettle below that temperature probe and potentially below the heater element, which we don't want to happen. So it's very important, and to be safe, this is a really good angle that I found for flow restriction. If I open it up all the way, I can very quickly see the flow, the level in the container drop down. So right about here is where the flow should be set for the coffee filter, especially with batches that are partial, like a 5-gallon batch in the 15-gallon kettle. But in general, the flow for the coffee filter should be restricted slightly during the coffee mash cycle, and about where the handle is there gives a pretty good flow. You just want to make sure that you don't have any suction or vacuum on the tube out of the pump. If I go all the way, I can actually end up generating a vacuum, or the hose wants to try to collapse on itself. So avoid that situation. Make sure that the water level or the wort level in there is always above the temperature probe. That'll assure that the heating element is always submerged as well. Okay, I'm checking back in here. We're almost at the end of our first mash step, where we've been holding 152 degrees for 1 hour. We've got 38 seconds left in that. I just wanted to show you the temperature profile here. It's been rock solid for almost the entire time, within a degree and holding 152 exactly. You can see the power has gone down to 6%. That seems to be the optimum for my current environmental conditions. 6% power on a 5500 watt element in my system here. And so when the end of this step occurs, it's going to start the next mash out step. In order to do that, it needs to raise the temperature of the kettle. So we'll watch it go through that process right now.
Heating to mash out temperature of 168 degrees.
Okay, so it's starting the second mash step, but before it can do a mash out, it needs to raise the temperature to 168. So you see that the power has gone up to 100%. The pump still running. I've got my flow restricted appropriately to maintain proper flow that assures that my heating element is underneath the liquid area. And you can see the temperature's already going up. It's 154. When it gets to 168, it'll automatically set a timer for our mash out time. So I'll check back then when we get close to that time. Okay, we're at 167 degrees, shooting for our 168 set point for our mash out. And we're in that step, and you can see the temperature rise. It's starting to level off at the 168. And the power is being automatically reduced to the PWR-L setting, which I have set at 45% right now. And as soon as we get to the 168 set point, it should automatically set the timer in the time remaining step for our mash out time.
Maintaining mash out temperature of 168 degrees.
Okay, so as you can see, we hit the 168 degrees, and the time remaining was automatically set to 15 minutes. And so our timer has started. It'll do that automatically, and at the end of that, we'll be done mashing, and we will be prompted to remove the coffee filter with the grains. And I'll fully...
Mash out complete. Please remove the coffee filter and install the automatic hops feeder. When finished, press the green start key.
Okay, so we're going to do exactly that. We're going to remove the coffee filter and add the hops feeder to the system, and we'll let you see that happen. Okay, it's time to remove the coffee filter. We've just been prompted by the system, which we've showed you. And again, I've got my system on a cart, which makes this really easy. I've also got a electric winch in my facility that allows it very easy to pull this out. Anyway, what I'm going to do is carefully reposition my brew cart underneath my winch. Okay? Get the cover off. Store that. Remove the hose from the accessory port. Remove the elbow from the coffee filter. Now be very careful that you don't tighten this too much when you install it. That's a good point right now, because if you tighten it too much on that fitting, it may unscrew from the bottom of the false bottom. So you don't want that to happen. So you remove this hose, and I'll move it aside. I then take my lift ring adapter and attach that to the threads of the center tube. Infusion tube it's called. Give it a good twist until the actual whole bottom switches. I'm going to lower my winch, hook it up, and very carefully make sure that nothing is being caught on. Specifically, keep the same orientation so you don't grab the heating element, and just carefully lift it up. And what I do is I do a little dance here. Really nice with this tool. And as you can see, the grain is being pushed up towards the top cover, but it's not completely there yet. Now many people ask, well, isn't squeezing the grain bad? Isn't going to release tannins and that kind of thing? And the answer to that question is no, it won't. The amount of force that you can put on these grains is basically just going to take away the airspace between the grains to make sure no water can stay trapped there, but it's not actually going to squeeze the grains themselves. So you see how easy that was? I just pushed down on it. And that's basically it. Let it sit there for a couple seconds. I also want to show you on the controller is that it's already heating the kettle to the boil temperature. You can see the temperature up to 188 already. And it's doing that while I am doing the filter removal process and draining. So I'm just going to let this sit here for a few minutes. I don't know if you can hear, but you can hear that it's still draining a little bit. And I want to make sure I get all that extra liquid out of the grain so that my drains are as dry as possible. And I'm just putting about maybe 20 pounds of downward force on here. Just enough to force that I've seen something come out of the top. And once I stop hearing anything dripping, which I'm getting to that point, I'm going to completely remove the entire filter. And how I do that is I actually just grab the handle. At that point, I don't use the lift ring anymore. And I lift this off and simply transfer it into the bucket that I showed you before. Then I'll put the cart back up against the wall into its position underneath the range hood, and since I'm boiling now, this is where I would turn on my evacuation system, because now I don't have a cover on anymore and I'm going to be generating a lot of steam, and you can see that already coming off. My evacuation system is very loud. You'll hear it fire up. But you can also see that the steam is being evacuated 100%. There's nothing escaping out beyond this range hood. So it's something you want to consider if you're brewing indoors. It's a really good ventilation system. Okay, it's prompted me to remove the coffee filter and install the automatic hops feeder. So I'm going to install the hops feeder just by setting it on the side of the rack. plug it in to my power outlet. Okay, I've just installed my hops feeder. As you can see, it's homing it. I left it in a position where it wasn't homing the last time, so it's automatically homing. And it will connect to the Brew-Boss controller. You can see currently it says error connecting. The Brew-Boss controller is not connected. And here we go. It just went connected, and it tells me that the position is home. So I'm going to hit the start key.
Add hops to the Brew-Boss feeder in the appropriate positions. When finished, press the green start key.
Okay, looking at the boil, we're currently using our PWRB, our boil power setting. Hops have been added. That's at 63%, as you can see. If you don't like that roll, all you have to do for the boil is take your hand on this bar and adjust the power, and you'll, for instance, if I come up to 92% or 91%, you'll now see a much more fervious boil. It's a much harder boil. And this is too much. You just want the bubbles to be breaking the surface to release the sulfurs and other things during this boil. So this is too much. So what I would do is manually reduce this, and I found for this size kettle in my atmospheric conditions, 63% is ideal. So I've changed it to 63%. This happens automatically. Once you find your ideal boil setting, set your PWRB setting in the parameters to that number. And as you can see, I've got a really good, just kind of rolling boil, not making a lot of noise, just enough so that the bubbles are breaking the surface. Anything more than that? Okay, I'm just checking in. I've got about 5 minutes left in my first 45 minutes of boil, up to the point where we add the finishing hops. Usually what I do during this time that it's boiling is I'm preparing my fermenter, I'm sanitizing it. I've got my fast ferment here. Really love these devices. I love the little collection ball at the bottom. It means that only about 1 inch of bitter sediment is in contact with your beer while it's fermenting. You can easily rack it right in there by removing the sediment and putting a clean ball in there. So I've got that all sanitized with sanitizer, and I'm setting up my Exchillerator counterflow chiller. This is a great little device that just it takes the chilling time down to about 1/4 of what I used to have. And what I like to do is at near the end of the boil, as you can see, we're still boiling really well here. Near the end of the boil, I like to run some boiling water through this to sanitize it. So what I'm doing is getting it set up for that. See, I've got my cold water. Okay, I'm just checking in here. We've got about 18 seconds left before our second hops edition, where we'll start our second boil timer. Just wanted to show you this happening. We're at 9 seconds. You can see the nice temperature profile that it's holding through this entire brew session. And now we've got a good boil going on. And
adding finishing hops and Irish moss positions 2 and 3 respectively. Maintain boil for 9 minutes.
okay, so you can see the hops feeder has automatically added the hops. Okay, I wanted to show you this. I've got about 3 minutes left in the boil, and what I like to do, usually about 5 minutes before, is I set my counterflow chiller up. I got it hooked up to my accessory port on the exit rather than into the fermenter, and I've also got my Whirlpool hooked up. And I'm going to turn the pump on and allow this to do the Whirlpool while I'm sanitizing my counterflow chiller by running boiling water through it. So I usually do this in the last couple minutes of boil. I need to add this to the steps in my file, but I haven't done it. So I'm going to do it manually just by turning on the pump. And you can see now I've got boiling water recirculating, and I'm starting to get my Whirlpool going. Now there's quite a bit of head loss in the counterflow chiller. So this is, I'm just using this to sanitize everything. I'm sanitizing the Brew-Boss. I'm sanitizing all the tubing that's going to go into the fermenter. I'm sanitizing the tubing inside the Exchillerator counterflow chiller. So right now I don't have any hot water or cold water running through there. I just want to try to maintain my boil. And as you can see, the temperature dropped considerably there at the end of the boil. So the power has automatically gone back up to 100%. And we've got about 1:50 left. This is a good chance for me to show you. I'd really actually like about 5 minutes of this, and because I'm a little behind the 8 ball trying to video here, you can change this at any time your time remaining, I want to add 5 minutes. Okay, I've automatically changed that to 5 minutes. So now I've got 5 minutes left in this step. You can do that with the temperature as well if you wanted the temperature changed for the target temperature, time remaining. So I've reset that to 5 minutes. So I'm going to get a good 5 minutes of recirculation in here. You see, okay, now what I've done is I go ahead and switch the exit hose from the pump back up to the accessory port. And I've installed the Whirlpool, and you can see I've got the Whirlpool operating, and you can see the really nice whirlpool I'm getting with that. And a lot of people have asked questions, why hasn't it reached the level? It's designed to actually be above the water level a couple of inches. If you get better swirl, if you get the surface tension of the flow hitting the surface of the water rather than it being below. So a lot of people are trying to use this with the actual nozzle underneath the level of the water. And it's designed to be above about 1.5 to 2 inches, even when you've got a full kettle with a 10-gallon batch. And you can see the flow that we're getting here is real good whirlpool. Okay, I've completed my boil, and I'm doing about 2 or 3 more minutes of swirl bossing to Whirlpool. You can see I've got a really good circulation going there, and you can see all the hops debris in the middle. Letting that go for 5 to 10 minutes, it's your choice. I'm just doing this at the end of the boil. Then what I'll do is end up taking the hose that goes into the accessory port from the pump and moving that to my chiller and actually pumping the wort through my counterflow chiller, which is the accelerator again. And there's the fitting it'll get hooked up to. It's not hooked up now. You see I also have an immersion chiller that I built myself many years ago. I still use that on occasion, but really if I'm in a hurry, the accelerator is about 4 times faster than the immersion chiller. Uses a lot less water, so a lot less fresh water for chilling and cooling. Much more efficient. So okay, I hope what you can see are doing here. Now I'm to the final step. We're all done and complete with our brewing process. I'm actually going to pump the wort in the kettle through the counterflow chiller. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn on the water supply. Okay, now I have a flow of cold water through the chiller, and then I'm going to turn on the pump, opening the valves, and pump the wort through the accelerator and into my fermenter. So I've got my hose into my fermenter, I've got everything set up. I'm going to turn the pump on. Currently 75 degrees, which is too warm. So what I do is actually restrict the flow out of the pump. Very easy to do until the temperature is my pitching temperature. Down to 71. Wait for it to equalize. A little too far, went to 67. A little more open. Okay, I got 68 degrees on my thermopen. If you don't have a thermopen, go out and get yourself one. They're expensive, but there's nothing more accurate out there. It's just, and they read so quickly. And I'm at 68 degrees. I don't know if you can see that. 68 exactly, and that's the pitching temperature I wanted. And that took a grand total of about 6 minutes. Okay, what I've done, we're going to just show you how easy it is to clean this coffee filter. I get a lot of questions about how to clean the filter. Is it easy? I can tell you this, it's easier than the bag. The bag tends to have a little, because it's nylon and has very small holes, a lot of the grain will try to embed itself in the bag. And so for cleaning the bags, I just recommend getting them as clean as you can, letting them dry, turning them inside out and just shaking them. And a lot of that, once it's dry, will come out of the bag. But for the coffee filter, really all I do is I put it in the sink. You can see the top. I've emptied the grain into my compost bin. Hot water. it just rinses off. I mean, you can look at this. Any grain that was stuck to it just seems to rinse off, especially if you hit it from the backside. So I rinse all the crud off first, any trapped grains, throw them in that same bucket. Pull out the false bottom. Again, here's where having that hand tight was very beneficial. Rinse that off. I find what works very well for these is a 3M type pad with the abrasive on one side. Just give it a good scrub. If there's anything stuck, some of the sticky, make sure you run water through it. Clean that out. Put that in the drain bucket. The basket itself, I find what works best is to turn it upside down in the sink and hit it with your spray. Just go all around, make sure it's all covered. You'll see the grain just falls right off like it's in a plastic bucket almost. And then kind of work the perimeter. Most of the grain, I don't have a very strong stream as you can see here. Most of the stuck grain just washes right out. I can see it all in the bottom of the sink. But you do get a couple that'll hang on there, and all you gotta do is rub it with your fingers from the outside as you're spraying. And they'll break right loose. It's quite amazing how easy it is to clean. There. And that's it. It's clean. You see there's nothing on there. It's a nice clean basket. I'm going to put that in the drain bucket. And I still have the false bottom to do. Again, come from the back side. The grains weren't touching. Get the spray if you need it. That helps a little. This is actually the hardest part to clean, believe it or not, of the entire basket, because the holes are a little larger in the false bottom, and the grains will tend to find their way into the holes and want to stay in there. Again, rub it from the back side, and rinse, and I'm done. So, that's all there is to cleaning the coffee filter. Okay, I just removed the heating element from the kettle. You can see there's quite a bit of hops debris on it that's kind of stuck to it. But I'm going to show you how to basically clean that. Just run it under hot water. This is the beauty of the stainless steel element. You can see I've not hardly done anything with just my fingers here. And all that crud has fallen off. And take this type of pad with a kind of a 3M non-scratch pad on one side. Give a quick rub between. Make sure you got all the surfaces. It just falls right off. It's just a matter of making sure you hit it with the pad, hitting it between the grooves there. There you go. Looks like new. Yeah, I also wanted to mention I've got the Brew-Boss element cleaner here. It's a cleaner that's a safe to ship type acid cleaner, safe for your hands. And just run that over all the surfaces after you're done, and that'll take all the lime off and make it shiny like it's brand new. And also, it's very important when you're cleaning your heating element to do it as soon after brewing as you can. If you let the crud and all the deposits that were on it sit on it and let them dry on, and it becomes very, very difficult to clean them. So after using the Brew-Boss sanitizer and cleaner, simply just rinse that off. Get a little dry, and you can see the element after cleaning looks brand new. You can't tell this has ever been used.